Welcome to the Leon and Jewel Collins Museum of African American History and Culture. This building was constructed in 1922 and 1923 as a Rosenwald School to serve African American students. The dedication speech at the opening of the school was given by Mary McLeod Bethune, founder of Bethune-Cookman University and advisor to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. As you explore the museum, you will discover more about Rosenwald schools. You will also learn about people associated with this historic building, including educator and civil rights activist Harry T. Moore. He began teaching at this school in 1925 before becoming principal of the African American School in Titusville.
Being a teacher, particularly when he became principal of a school, he saw the inequities not only in the school facilities, but also in the amount of money that the state was spending on black children versus white children. And of course, he was very much aware of the pay inequity for black and white teachers. So he had talked about this to a good friend of his, John Gilbert, who was a principal of the Cocoa Colored School, and convinced John to be the plaintiff in a lawsuit that he filed to equalize teacher pay.
Writer, folklorist, and anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston, best known for her novel Their Eyes Were Watching God, spent some of her most productive years in Brevard County. In 1956, she lived less than half a mile from this building. Today, Hurston's work is taught in high schools and colleges around the world.
So it's quite interesting to see that now, if you're going to be educated, you have to have read Zora Neale Hurston.
Artist R.L. Lewis was born and raised in Cocoa and attended Monroe High School in the late 1950s, a few years after the school moved from this building to a newer facility just down the street. His art teacher, Mrs. Leisure, introduced him to the work of Harold Newton. Lewis, along with Newton, would become one of the original highwayman artists.
The way I look at it is this way. If you've got to survive, you'll survive. I don't care what it is. Tough times don't last. Tough people do. So that's one way to look at that. But this art that you see is the highwayman art. It was not art for the sake of art, just to put beautiful stuff up. It was art for the sake of, in some cases, survival.
This museum honors, commemorates, and celebrates the people who have lived and worked in this community. Laura Solomon Brown was a news librarian at Florida Today newspaper. She attended Monroe High School in the late 1940s when it was still located in this building. Her classmates included future community leaders Leon Collins, Jolie Smith, and Richard Blake.
Well, I grew up on Magnolia Street, which is now Stone Street. At 708 Magnolia. My dad owned the property from 708 to 815. He had a business. He was a barber, ran a barber shop. Right next door, my mom ran a grocery store. And all the businesses down in that area were black owned. There was Mr. Pullen, he had a dry cleaner. Mr. J.C. Ager had a grocery store. There was Davis Restaurant. Mr. Howard Shank had a little garage there. And Miss Mary George had a beauty shop. And there were just so many people down there that owned everything.
Michael C. Blake is the first African-American mayor of Cocoa. His grandfather, Virgil Blake, was the first African-American to serve on the city's Planning and Zoning Board, and his father, Richard Blake, was the first elected African-American city official in Rockledge. This museum is located on Blake Avenue. As mayor of Cocoa, Michael Blake has helped to make the Leon and Jewel Collins Museum of African-American History a reality.
Everyone should be able to identify, to protect and preserve their history, because we all matter. Even though we come from different tribes, we belong to one race. That's the human race. We're all God's children. 100 years from now, they can go back and retrieve the information that's there in that historical building, that they're named after Mr. Leon Collins and Mrs. Jewel Collins. They played a very pivotal point in the overall success of cocoa. So that is the reason why I acknowledge them. They're just like a spoke in the wheel, that each part has its own intricate design to make the overall success of the wheel. So I salute all citizens on both sides of the track, but especially where I grew up at, in the African American community.
Leon Collins was the first African American man elected to the Cocoa City Council in 1973. He also served as vice mayor. Jewel Collins was the first African American woman elected to the Cocoa City Council in 1999, and she also served as deputy mayor. Community leaders would gather at the Collins home to discuss how to make life better for African Americans in Cocoa.
We had a big dining room table, and I have that in the museum. And we would sit around the table, and that was Dr. Jolie Smith, Richard Blake, Sylvester Donald, and I was trying to think of some of the other guys that was with us, and that we would have our meetings at my house at the table. So we have taken that table, and we have put that table into the museum now. So that table is there.
Jewel Collins hopes that the museum will inspire young people in the community to do their best and achieve great things.
My daddy had given this to us. He said, if you see your brother down, reach down and pull him up, help him up. And I always kept that in my mind, that if I can help somebody along the way, then I figured that, whatever happened to me, I wanted to see someone else achieve, not just me, but someone else.
To augment your experience at the Leon and Jewel Collins Museum of African American History and Culture, visit our website at collinsmuseumcocoa.org or download our app. This project is sponsored in part by the Department of State Division of Historical Resources and the state of Florida. It's also made possible by the City of Cocoa and produced by the Florida Historical Society.